The giant screen behind the stage flashed, and a name glowed next to an offshore bank account number, Bonnie Thompson. A single sharp gasp cut through the ballroom, followed by a dead, echoing silence. On stage, my boss, Bonnie, froze. The microphone slipped from her hand, hitting the floor with a dull thud that sealed her fate. The color drained from her face, her eyes wide with a terror that finally saw me in the audience. That was the end of her. You're probably wondering how a senior manager at a top tech firm ended up publicly crucified at a shareholder meeting. It wasn't quick, and it wasn't easy. It was a masterpiece of revenge, born from months of torment. To understand how I destroyed her, you need to understand how she first tried to destroy me. Let's go back to the beginning. My name is Emma, and for the first 2 years of my career at Innovatech Solutions, I genuinely believed in the corporate fairy tale, that if you were talented, worked harder than anyone else, and delivered results, you would be untouchable. Innovatech wasn't just a job, it was the realization of a dream. Our downtown office was a vibrant ecosystem of glass walls, whiteboard-covered hallways, and the constant low hum of servers and brilliant minds at work. The coffee was free, the hours were long, and the work was exhilarating. I wasn't just another junior developer. I was a rising star. My mentor, a senior engineer named Mark, was a quiet, fiercely intelligent man who saw potential in me from day one. He never handed me answers. I remember being hopelessly stuck on the Helios project, a critical initiative to streamline our bloated flagship software. I had been staring at the same block of inefficient code for a week straight. Mark didn't look at my screen. He just rolled his chair over and asked, "What if the problem isn't the code? What if the problem is the question you're asking the code to answer?" It was like a key turning in my brain. I spent the next 48 hours, fueled by stale pizza and a manic sense of purpose, rewriting the entire data request architecture from the ground up. It was a radical solution, but I knew it would work. The Helios update launched, and the results were staggering. It didn't just reduce server load by 30%, it made the entire user experience faster, smoother, and more stable. The CEO, a charismatic man named Mr. Davison, made a point to come to my desk personally. In front of the entire department, he shook my hand and said, "Emma, this is the kind of work that defines the future of this company. Exceptional." That commendation meant everything. It solidified my friendship with my work circle, Ben, a sharp-witted QA tester who could find a bug in a line of perfect code, and Maria, a UI/UX designer with an almost magical sense of user empathy. We were a unit. We'd celebrate our wins with cheap beer at the pub down the street and commiserate over project setbacks. I felt like I had a place, a purpose, and a future. My career trajectory felt like a straight, ascending line. That line began to bend the day Innovatech hired Bonnie Thompson. She was brought in from a massive, soulless competitor to be our new senior manager of product development. Her introductory email was a masterclass in corporate jargon, filled with phrases like synergizing core competencies and actualizing innovative paradigms. She was intimidatingly polished, with a wardrobe that cost more than my car, and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Our first one-on-one meeting took place in her sterile, glass-walled office that overlooked the entire floor. She gestured for me to sit, her movements precise and controlled. "Emma," she began, her voice a low, smooth purr, "I've made it a priority to meet with our high-potential talent first. Your work on Helios was impressive, very impressive for your level." The subtle qualifier, "for your level," slid into the compliment like a sliver of glass. I barely noticed it at the time. "I believe in fostering talent," she continued, leaning forward. "I see you as a key player. My door is always open to you." I left that meeting feeling validated, chosen. I told Ben about it over lunch. He swirled his noodles with a fork and frowned. "I don't know, Emma. She sounds a little too slick. All polish, no substance." I brushed it off as him being cynical. I wanted to believe I had a powerful new ally. The illusion shattered less than a month later. In a major brainstorming session for Project Odyssey, our next-generation platform, I pitched an idea I was incredibly proud of. It was a predictive data caching system that would learn user habits to preload assets, making the app feel almost instantaneous. I filled a whiteboard with diagrams, my marker flying as I explained the logic. The energy in the room was electric. The other engineers were firing questions, building on the concept. It felt like one of those perfect moments of collaborative genius. Bonnie watched the entire presentation from the head of the table, silent and unreadable. When the buzz finally died down, she offered a small, tight smile. "A very ambitious concept, Emma. Thank you for that initial spark. A lot to think about." She then swiftly moved the meeting onto another topic, effectively tabling my idea. 1 week later, the department heads were called to a top-level strategy meeting. Ben managed to get me an invite, listing me as a technical consultant. I sat in the back, just wanting to observe. Bonnie took the stage to present her vision for Project Odyssey, and there it was, my predictive caching system presented with stunning graphics and renamed Intuitive Asset Realization. She explained its every function with the cool authority of someone who had conceived it herself. She had stolen it, bolt for bolt, and was now taking a victory lap in front of the most powerful people in the company. I felt the blood drain from my face. It was so brazen, so absolute. After the meeting, as executives patted her on the back, I tried to approach her. Before I could even form a sentence, she saw me, smiled that chilling smile, and said, "See, Emma? I told you I elevate talent. Your little spark, my strategic framework, that's synergy." She said it quietly, for my ears only, a clear and unmistakable threat. It wasn't just theft, it was a power play. She was showing me that my ideas were now her property, and there was nothing I could do about it. Life under Bonnie's management became a masterclass in psychological warfare. The intellectual property theft was constant, but it was the smaller, more insidious acts of sabotage that truly began to wear me down. She was an expert at creating problems that only she could solve, making me look incompetent while she appeared indispensable. One particularly brutal example happened during a critical 2-week sprint. I was responsible for a new feature that the marketing team was already building a campaign around. The deadline was absolute. On the Thursday before the Friday review, my code was stable, tested, and ready. I felt a rare moment of relief. That afternoon, Bonnie called me into her office for an impromptu performance check-in. For an hour, she subjected me to a bewildering series of questions about my 5-year plan, my commitment to the corporate ladder, and my brand identity within the company. It was a disorienting word salad that left my head spinning. When I finally returned to my desk, I saw an urgent flag on my project. A catastrophic bug had somehow been introduced into the main branch, breaking the entire feature. Panic set in. The code was a tangled mess. Functions were mysteriously corrupted, and dependencies were broken. It made no sense. It was perfect, just an hour ago. As I frantically tried to diagnose the issue, a company-wide email from Bonnie landed in everyone's inbox. Subject: Project Odyssey Update. Minor setback team, just a heads up. I was doing a final review of the upcoming feature and discovered a significant architectural flaw in Emma's latest commit. It unfortunately created a critical instability. I've managed to contain the issue and am working on a patch, but we will miss tomorrow's deadline. This is a crucial learning moment about the importance of rigorous self-testing. Let's all use this to grow. Best, Bonnie. It was a public execution disguised as a corporate memo. She had sabotaged my code while I was trapped in her office, then framed it as my failure. I worked through the night, fueled by rage and coffee, and by 6 a.m. I had found the issue. It wasn't a flaw. A single, deliberately placed line of malicious code had been inserted, designed to cause the maximum possible damage. The commit log showed it had been done from an admin account, but the timestamp was right in the middle of my meeting with her. It was her work, but I had no way to prove it. I managed to fix it, but the damage to my reputation was done. This constant stress began to bleed into every corner of my life. I was losing sleep. My passion for coding, once a source of joy, now felt like a liability. Ben and Maria tried to support me, but they were powerless. "She's a black widow, Emma," Ben told me over lunch. "She'll drain you dry and then move on." The final unforgivable blow came with the TechCon showcase in Las Vegas. The contract with Viridian Dynamics wasn't just a business deal, it was Innovatech's chance to leapfrog our biggest competitor. The entire event was built around the interactive demo I was creating. I poured my soul into it. For 2 months, my life was a cycle of coding, testing, and refining. The final product was, without exaggeration, a work of art. We arrived in Vegas, the air thick with nervous energy and the stale smell of casino air conditioning. The night before the presentation, I ran the final diagnostics in our hotel conference room. It was flawless. I backed it up to the presentation server, the local drive on the laptop, and an external SSD I kept in my bag. I was paranoid, but I thought I was safe. The next morning, I walked into the room to find a scene of quiet chaos. Our chief technology officer was pale, and Bonnie was speaking to him in low concerned tones. My demo was on the main screen, but it was a garbled mess. "The server version is corrupted," the CTO said, his voice tight. "It's okay," I said, my heart starting to pound. "I have 2 local backups." I plugged in the laptop's local drive. Corrupted. Then I pulled the SSD from my bag, my last hope. I plugged it in. The drive was empty. Not just empty, but wiped with a professional-grade data destruction program. It hadn't just been deleted. It had been scoured from existence. My blood ran cold. The only time that SSD had been out of my sight was when I left my bag in the locked conference room overnight. Only someone with a key card could have gotten in. Someone like Bonnie. As this realization dawned on me, Bonnie put a hand on my shoulder, her touch feeling like a spider's legs. "Don't worry, Emma," she said, her voice filled with fake sympathy. "These things happen." Then she turned to the assembled executives. "It seems Emma's demo has suffered a complete data failure, a devastating technical issue, but the show must go on." She produced her own laptop and ran a generic, soul-crushingly boring PowerPoint presentation. The Viridian executives sat through it with expressions of polite indifference. One of them spent most of the time answering emails on his phone. We didn't just lose the contract, we became a joke. The official debriefing back at headquarters was a kangaroo court. Bonnie was hailed as the hero who salvaged the presentation, while I was cast as the irresponsible developer whose failure had cost the company millions. My protests about sabotage were dismissed as excuses. The CEO, Mr. Davison, looked at me with an expression of profound disappointment. "Emma," he said, his voice cold, "your potential is meaningless without reliability." I was placed on a formal performance improvement plan, a corporate death sentence. My career at Innovatech was, for all intents and purposes, over. That weekend was a blur of anger and despair. My apartment felt like a prison. I unplugged my phone, ignoring the pitying texts from colleagues and the concerned calls from my parents. I was trapped in a feedback loop of humiliation, replaying Bonnie's triumphant expression and the CEO's disappointed face over and over. By Sunday afternoon, I had hit rock bottom. I was convinced my career in tech was over. Who would hire a developer who was publicly blamed for losing a multi-million-dollar contract? I opened my laptop and started browse for jobs, not in tech, but in retail, in food service, anything that would get me away from the world that had so thoroughly broken me. I was halfway through an application for an assistant manager position at a coffee shop when an email notification popped onto my screen. It was from Bonnie. Subject: "Your success is my success. Hi, Emma. I know this is a difficult time for you, but I wanted to reach out personally and reiterate my support. I have already drafted the initial goals for your performance improvement plan. I think you'll find them challenging but ultimately rewarding. I have full confidence that you can turn this into a positive growth experience. Let's connect on Monday to go over the details. Best, Bonnie." Reading her condescending, triumphant words was like being doused with gasoline and set on fire. The self-pity, the despair, it all burned away in a flash of pure clarifying rage. The patronizing tone, the thinly veiled glee, she was enjoying this. She wasn't just content with destroying my career, she wanted to orchestrate every second of my humiliation. I looked from her email to the coffee shop application, and in that moment, something inside me shifted, hardened, and became something new and dangerous. Quitting would be a gift to her. Running away would be her final victory. I wasn't going to run. I deleted the job application. I closed the browser. I opened a new, blank, encrypted text document. At the top, I typed a single title: Project Chimera. The name felt right. In mythology, the Chimera was a monster made of disparate parts. This project would be the same: a monster built from server logs, email archives, financial records, and every lie Bonnie had ever told. It wouldn't be a project of defense. It would be a project of annihilation. I wasn't just going to save my job. I was going to dismantle her life, piece by piece, using the very skills she had tried to beat out of me. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was now overshadowed by a powerful, exhilarating sense of purpose. The game had changed. She thought she was the predator, and I was the prey. She had no idea I was building a trap. My new life began. By day, I was Emma, the disgraced developer, meekly ticking off the boxes on my humiliating performance improvement plan. I attended every pointless meeting. I nodded obediently as Bonnie explained basic coding concepts to me. I was a ghost of my former self, and she savored every moment of it. But by night, I was someone else entirely. I was a digital hunter. My apartment transformed into a war room. I bought a new laptop, paying in cash, and installed a suite of privacy-focused software. My investigation started with the TechCon sabotage. Proving she wiped my drives seemed impossible, but I had a theory. The hotel's conference rooms had their own dedicated network, and I suspected its security was lax. I started by using social engineering. I called the hotel's IT support, posing as a frantic event planner who had lost a file from a previous conference. With a sob story and some technical-sounding jargon, I convinced a low-level tech to email me the network security protocols from that week. As I suspected, they were a joke. More importantly, they hadn't wiped the router's access logs. Getting into that router remotely was my next challenge. It took me 3 nights of probing for vulnerabilities before I found one, an outdated firmware version with a known exploit. At 3 a.m. on a Wednesday, I was in. I spent hours sifting through raw log data until I found it. At 2:14 a.m. on the night of the sabotage, a device connected to the network. Its MAC address, a unique hardware identifier, was registered to a Dell XPS laptop, the exact model Bonnie used. The device accessed the presentation server, downloaded a data scouring program, and then systematically wiped my files from the server and the 2 local drives connected to it. It was the digital smoking gun. I downloaded every log, encrypted it, and uploaded it to a secure, anonymous cloud server based in Switzerland. Next, I needed human intelligence. Ben was my inside man. He was angry about what had happened to me and to our old mentor, Mark. She runs this department like her own little kingdom, he told me. People are terrified of her. Ben used his QA access to pull every performance review Bonnie had ever submitted for her direct reports. The pattern was glaring. Anyone she perceived as a threat received glowing reviews for the first few months, followed by a sudden, sharp decline, with vague, unsubstantiated criticisms, building a case for their eventual dismissal. It was a factory for manufacturing failure. I reconnected with Mark. He was initially reluctant, but when I showed him the server logs from Vegas, his reluctance turned to cold anger. He spent a weekend digging through his old hard drives and found a gold mine. A recorded video of a meeting where Bonnie had presented one of his architectural designs as her own. The video's metadata proved it was recorded 3 days before Bonnie claimed to have conceived the idea. It was irrefutable proof of her plagiarism. Mark also gave me the crucial hint that led to the final act. She was always bragging about her investment portfolio, he said, always going on about creative asset management. For someone on her salary, it seemed unlikely. That phrase, creative asset management, stuck in my head. I started digging into the financial records for the projects Bonnie managed. This was the most dangerous part. Accessing financial servers would trigger alarms. I needed a ghost key. I found it in the form of a temporary developer account for a summer intern who had left 3 years ago. The account was still active, a sloppy oversight by IT. It had limited read-only access, but it was enough. For weeks, I found nothing. The official budgets were clean. But one night, I noticed something odd. The file naming convention for some archived project budgets was inconsistent. Most were named Project Name Budget Final.xlsx. But a few had a V2 appended to them. They were hidden in deep subdirectories. I opened one. It was a shadow ledger. The spreadsheet had 2 tabs. One was the official budget. The other, labeled Internal, was completely different. Vendor costs were inflated by 20 to 30%, and there were massive, recurring payments to a company I'd never heard of, Golden Caspian Consulting. I almost got caught. One night, while I was accessing the shadow ledgers, I saw an alert in the system monitor. An IT security admin was running a late-night audit of active user accounts. My heart leaped into my throat. The intern account I was using would be an immediate red flag. I had seconds to act. I killed my connection and immediately started flooding the server with meaningless pings from a dozen different proxy addresses, a digital smokescreen. The admin would see a flurry of random noise, likely assuming it was a network glitch. I held my breath for 10 minutes, watching the logs. The admin eventually logged off. It was too close. I knew I was running out of time. I spent the next 48 hours frantically digging into Golden Caspian. It was a shell corporation, a ghost. But Bonnie had made one fatal mistake. While frantically searching her old company emails, I found a chain where she was arguing with the offshore bank that held the Golden Caspian account. She was complaining about a problem with her security token. To prove her identity, the bank representative asked her to confirm the name on the account. She replied, "The account holder is Bonnie Thompson." I stared at the screen, a slow smile spreading across my face. I had her. The sabotage, the plagiarism, the systematic harassment, the witness testimony, and now grand larceny, confirmed in her own words. I spent the final week building my weapon. It was a simple, elegant PowerPoint presentation. Each slide was a single, devastating piece of evidence, presented without commentary. The logs, the video, the performance reviews, the shadow ledgers, and the final, damning email. I set up the anonymous email address. I booked a flight to the city where the annual shareholders meeting was being held. Project Chimera was complete. It was time to unleash the monster. The grand ballroom of the Hilton was opulent and suffocating. The air was thick with the scent of money and expensive cologne. I found a seat in the back, just another anonymous face in a sea of dark suits. My hands were steady. My pulse was even. I felt a profound and unsettling calm, the calm of a person who knows exactly how the future is about to unfold. Bonnie took the stage to a round of enthusiastic applause. She was in her element, a vision of corporate power and success. She spoke with practiced ease about a year of unprecedented growth, her voice resonating with confidence. She pointed to charts showing soaring profits and successful project launches, many of which were built on the broken backs of people like me and Mark. She was the star of the show, and she was glowing. As she moved towards her final slide, a triumphant summary of her visionary leadership, I pulled out the burner phone. The email was drafted and waiting. The subject line was surgically precise. Urgent. Evidence of financial fraud and managerial misconduct by Bonnie Thompson. The recipient list was a thing of beauty. The entire board of directors, the executive team, every major shareholder on the attendance list, and, for good measure, the tech news editors at the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, and TechCrunch. She paused for dramatic effect before her conclusion. In that pause, I hit send. For a few seconds, the only sound was her voice. Then, a single, distinct notification ping sounded from the front row. It was followed by another, and then another, a cascading wave of chimes that rippled through the ballroom. It was a symphony of digital doom. A low murmur started to build. Heads dropped as hundreds of people looked down at their phones. On stage, Bonnie's confident smile faltered. She saw the distraction and tried to power through it. "As you can see, our trajectory is clear," she began, but her voice was drowned out by the growing buzz. The CEO, Mr. Davison, sitting directly in front of the stage, looked down at his phone. I watched as his face went from confusion to disbelief, then to a dark, thunderous rage. He looked up from his phone, not at Bonnie, but at the giant screen behind her. And that's when I made my final move. With a single keystroke on my laptop, I sent the command. I hijacked the ballroom's AV system. Bonnie's triumphant corporate logo vanished from the screen. It was replaced by the cold, hard text of the server log from Las Vegas, with her MAC address and the secure delete command highlighted in red. The transformation of the room was absolute. The murmuring ceased, replaced by a stunned collective silence. Every eye in the ballroom, over 500 pairs, snapped to the giant screen. Bonnie stared at the screen, her mouth slightly open. The color drained from her face, leaving behind a waxy, pale mask of horror. That's not, she stammered, her voice a thin, reedy thing that was swallowed by the cavernous room. But the slide changed. It was now the side-by-side comparison of my project proposal and her intuitive asset realization presentation. A low gasp rippled through the audience. The slide changed again. It was the video of Mark's meeting, followed by the slide of Bonnie claiming his idea 3 days later. The presentation continued its automated, merciless march forward. The fabricated performance reviews, the damning witness statement from Mark. Each slide was a perfectly aimed shot, methodically dismantling her carefully constructed reality. People were no longer just watching. They were turning to each other, whispering in shocked tones. The CFO, a man with a face like a clenched fist, was staring at the screen, then at Bonnie, his expression one of pure, unadulterated fury. And then came the financial slides, the shadow ledgers, the inflated invoices for Golden Caspian Consulting. The room, which had been murmuring, fell utterly silent again, a heavy, waiting silence. The final slide appeared. It was the screenshot of her email to the offshore bank, her name typed out in black and white, confirming her as the account holder. The silence broke. It wasn't a murmur this time. It was a roar. Shareholders were on their feet, shouting. The CEO was already on his feet, his face purple with rage. He jabbed a finger towards the stage and bellowed at his security chief. "Get her off that stage! Now! Get legal down here!" 2 large security guards moved towards the stage. Bonnie seemed to shrink before my eyes. All the power, all the predatory confidence, it had all evaporated, leaving a terrified, pathetic woman in an expensive suit. She backed away from the podium as they approached, shaking her head in denial. As they flanked her and began to escort her from the stage, her frantic, terrified eyes scanned the audience, searching for the source of her destruction. And then our eyes met. In that one, fleeting moment, she knew. It was me, the quiet developer she had tried to crush. The bug she thought she had deleted had just crashed the entire system. Her system. I didn't smile, I didn't gloat. I just held her gaze, my expression a blank, unreadable mirror reflecting her own ruin. The chaos of the meeting was only the beginning. My anonymous email to the press had worked perfectly. By the next morning, the story was the lead item on every major tech news site. Innovatech executive ousted in dramatic shareholder meeting takedown was the kind of headline that shareholders and boards have nightmares about. Innovatech went into full-blown crisis mode. They were forced to launch a massive, transparent internal investigation, hiring an outside law firm to handle it. Of course, they only confirmed what my presentation had already laid bare. Bonnie was fired so fast it created a sonic boom. The company immediately filed a civil suit against her to reclaim the embezzled funds, and the district attorney's office, prompted by the public evidence of fraud, opened a criminal investigation. Her life, as she knew it, was over. I heard a year later from Ben that she was drowning in legal fees, had sold her expensive condo, and was completely unemployable. 2 weeks after the incident, I was summoned to Mr. Davison's office. He looked 10 years older. He offered me a coffee and then gave me the most sincere, humbling apology I have ever received. He apologized for not seeing what was happening, for trusting the wrong person, and for failing to protect his employees. "You have shown more integrity and courage than anyone I've met in a long time, Emma," he said, looking me straight in the eye. "This company is wounded. Its culture is broken. I need someone to help me fix it, not just a developer, a leader." He offered me Bonnie's old job, Senior Manager of Product Development. He gave me a mandate to rebuild the department from the ground up, with an emphasis on transparency, collaboration, and integrity. I accepted. My first act was to have Bonnie's old office, with its intimidating glass walls, completely dismantled. I replaced it with an open plan, collaborative space for the whole team. My second act was to hold one-on-ones with every single member of the department. I listened to their stories, their fears, their ideas. Many had their own smaller stories of being bullied or marginalized by Bonnie. In my first team meeting as manager, I implemented the Helios rule, named after my first big project. It stipulated that all ideas, from their initial conception on a whiteboard to their final launch, would be digitally tagged to their creators. All credit would be public, permanent, and non-transferable. The look of relief on the faces of my team was my real reward. Looking back, the entire ordeal taught me a dark but valuable lesson. The world isn't always fair, and sometimes the systems in place to protect you are the very things that enable your abusers. Revenge is a complicated word. What I did wasn't just about hurting Bonnie. It was about exposing the truth in a way that could not be ignored. It was about creating consequences for actions that were poisoning an entire workplace. I didn't just get even. I got justice, not only for myself, but for everyone she had harmed. I learned that true power isn't about control and intimidation. It's about the quiet, relentless pursuit of the truth. And I learned that I was much, much stronger than I ever thought possible. So, that's my story. A long, complicated journey from being a victim to becoming an instrument of justice. It was draining and dangerous, but seeing a truly collaborative and healthy team rise from the ashes of Bonnie's toxic kingdom made it all worthwhile. Now, I want to hear from you. What's the most epic revenge story you've ever heard or been a part of? I want to hear about the bullies who got what was coming to them, the liars who were exposed, the karmic justice that we all love to see. Share your stories in the comments below. If you found this story satisfying and want more deep dives into tales of epic takedowns and righteous victories, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let us know what kinds of stories you want to see next. Thanks for listening. And remember, never ever underestimate the power of a smart, determined person who has finally been pushed too far.